Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is episode 17 of the KMG Show. I thought I'd start today with something that isn't associated with, panic, say, fear, angst, existential agony, something amusing. Prince Harry, the ginger waster. He's a thicko. He got taken in by two Russian pranksters called Vladimir and Alexei, aka Vovan and Lexus. He got taken in by them not once, but twice. They managed to get his phone number on Vancouver Island, where I live, and they called in to him with an accomplice as Greta Thunberg, and then as Greta Thunberg with her father, Svante, I believe his name is. And Harry had some, amusing things to say. Let's say Prince Harry was asked about Donald Trump. And he said, the mere fact that Donald Trump is pushing the coal industry is so big in America, he has blood on his hands. But Trump will want to meet you to make him look better, but he won't want to have a discussion about climate change with you because you will outsmart him. He was asked about his wife, for the moment, Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. I can assure you, marrying a prince or princess is not all it's made out to be, but sometimes the right decision isn't always the easy one. And this decision certainly wasn't the easy one, but it was the right decision for our family. The right decision to be able to protect my son. I think there's a hell of a lot of people around the world that can identify and respect us for putting our family first. He says our son. You know, there's considerable mystery about this child, which was ridiculously dubbed Archie, about whose child it is. Rumors that the pregnancy was fake, that some child was procured at some time, not at the official due date. This was all shrouded in mystery. Now, of course, if you know anything about royal history, you know that royal births are not supposed to be shrouded in mystery because of, the questions of legitimacy and the like. But apparently the ID was not actually signed by doctors. So, who this child is, who the father, the mother is, we really don't know. So Prince Harry fancies himself a philosopher who means to heal the world. So what does he have to say on climate? Unfortunately, the world is being led by some very sick people. So people like yourselves and the younger generations are the ones that are going to make all the difference. People need to be woken up. And the only way to wake people up from what effectively is a consciousness crisis is, I think, you need to be doing extreme things. What you need to do is make real big changes that actually shock people. And it's that shock factor that wakes people up. But it would seem then that Prince Harry is an admirer of what's called Extinction Rebellion. He was asked about private jets. And he said, unfortunately, there is very few alternatives. We have to fly in commercial planes all over the world. Do you? Do you now? Nowhere near as much as most people who do it for a night or weekends. I told you he was a thicko. Most people? Really? Certainly for my family, to protect my family from these people, as you can well understand, I have to put protections and safety of my family first, and these people are never ending. So yes, that's why he decided to translate himself from England to Vancouver Island, which necessitates much flying back and forth. He was asked about himself. He said, I was in the military for 10 years, so I'm more normal than my family would like to believe. That's a revealing statement. But certainly being in a different position now gives us the ability to say things and do things that we might not have been able to do. And seeing as everyone under the age of 35 or 36 seems to be carrying out an activist role, gives us the opportunity to try and make more of a difference without being criticized. As they say, I think this fellow needs to get out a bit more. He really believes that everyone under the age of 35 or 36 is carrying out an activist's role. He talked and talked and talked and talked, and he has this strange idea that he is going to, as I say, heal the world somehow. Him and Meghan Markle are going to do that. He insisted that no one has stripped us of our titles. He said because of a technicality within the family, if we are earning money separately from within the family structure, then we obviously have been asked not to use our titles in order to make money, which we would never do. But the press managed to jump on that to make it look like we had been stripped. Well, you see, being a member of the royal family is not supposed to be a money-making position. I mean, that should be fairly obvious, even to a thicko like Prince Harry. He was using money, using Sussex Royal. They certainly got paid, six figures by J.P. Morgan Chase, and this was supposedly kept secret, but apparently he was carrying on about the death of his mother, which was 23 years ago. Quite a long time ago. He doesn't really have anything to say. Megan Mertz has an awful lot to say, but keep in mind that she is a duchess only by virtue of her marriage to Harry. So they have this foundation, let's see, on charity work. Now, Harry and Meghan were associated with a number of charities as patrons, but it turned out that they didn't really want to do anything with regard to that, because I suppose it could be considered rather boring work. Well, it's not very difficult work, but I suppose it could be considered boring. He said, I think at the moment, my wife and we were being directed towards starting a foundation, but we actually decided there is probably enough foundations out there doing amazing work. And there's a hell of a lot of money being passed around the world. And there are so many problems, but we thought we'd just take a moment and see if there was some form of other organization or different entity we could create that could bring people together rather than us just starting a foundation. We don't think the world necessarily needs another foundation from us. So we are just taking a little bit more time to think about how we can use our platform and how we can use our voice to try and encourage real change and real difference, as opposed to, small incremental changes. Again, he seems to be quite the Bolshevik these days. As we all know, the world's problems seem to be getting bigger and seem to be happening far quicker. I think the solutions are far quicker to enable as well, but there needs to be a real shift in mindset. We try and do our best. I've spent many, many years being criticized by the media for doing all sorts of things and trying to change the way we think. And I can sympathize, but at the same time applaud the work that all of you are doing, because it's not an easy time and the world is a troubled place and it can be very easy to give up. And I think what you guys are doing is absolutely remarkable. Keep in mind that he believed that he was talking to Greta Thunberg and her father. So there's not going to be a foundation, but there will be some sort of entity, whatever that might mean. The entity is not going to be called Sussex Royal, excuse me. We're going to milk that up to the very last minute. So Meghan Mertz marries Prince Harry, and she is acclaimed as a breath of fresh air and all that sort of thing. Well, she has certainly worn out her welcome in Britain. A poll on Good Morning Britain showed that 90% of viewers did not want the government to pay for his and her protection. Meanwhile, the Canadian government has said that the protection has been paid for by the Canadian government, but that will be ending soon. So they have two choices. They can pay for their own protection, or they can try to get Prince Charles to pay for it. According to the Mail, royal commentators today said Prince Harry had been made to look extremely foolish in two calls from Russian pranksters and said it was very unwise for him to speak so openly on the phone. Yes, yes, I suppose it was. Royal commentator and former editor of International Who's Who, Richard Fitzwilliams, told Mail Online that Harry has in a vulnerable period, or I suppose there's a bean missing there, and suggested he may have been duped because of his open nature. I'll have to add that to my euphemism list. It would have only have been sensible to have his staff verify who was calling and asking so many questions. The invention of a greatest father indicates that these are skilled hoaxers who have fooled several celebrity victims. Harry has an open nature, and he's in a vulnerable period where he has jettisoned the values he has been brought up with. Yes, he has jettisoned his values. What the new values are, I guess Meghan will be telling him in good time. This hoax will make him look extremely foolish, said Fitzwilliams, and not for the first time. Prince Charles's biographer, Tom Bower, told Mail Online that he believed Harry was careful not to reveal too much about his demons and dilemmas and gave nothing away. Yeah, saying the President of the United States has blood on his hands, that is certainly giving something away. Talking about how he is a more normal person than his family thinks he is certainly giving himself away. Or so it would seem to me. Let's see, another story from the Mail. Who's got the upper hand? Meghan Markle is always reaching out to touch Prince Harry, but is it affection or an unspoken sign of who's in charge, asks Beth Hale. Well, we know that Meghan's in charge, that she has consistently violated protocol. When they make appearances together, he is supposed to go first, and she is supposed to follow in his wake. But she always barges ahead. Beth Hale says every couple has their secret codes, whether it's pulling a particular expression to signal that you want to go home, or the touch of a hand on an arm when one partner needs extra reassurance. But when you're in the public eye together, being able to communicate non-verbally is perhaps more vital than ever. Harry and Meghan look as if they have got it down to a fine art, with a series of well-practiced touches that seem to signal exactly how one wants the other to behave. Their last series of engagements as senior royals has been no exception. At London's Mansion House last week, where the couple attended the annual Endeavour Fund Awards, Meghan expertly maneuvered her husband out of the way so she could speak to another woman. Yes, expertly maneuvered her husband out of the way. First, she put her hand on his shoulder and then gently pulled him back so she could move forward. Cue Harry putting his hand to his wife's back to usher her past. If you look at the pictures of the two, as I've mentioned before, it's really rather strange because she is supposed to be the one who was moved up in the world. She is the one who bagged a royal. But he is always seemingly looking to her for reassurance, whereas she doesn't seem to be looking at him most of the time. There's no question, who's in charge here. And Meghan Markle is apparently complaining that the royal family is just so uptight. I didn't know that word was still in vogue. I guess they're just so snobby and stuck up. And did this woman know anything about the royal family? before she decided to join it. Apparently, she'd made quite a study of it, but I suppose that she thought that she would let them know that traditions of hundreds of years would need to be swept aside, and that Megan Mertz would become the cynosure of all eyes. She would be the people's Duchess, just as the late Princess of Wales was supposedly the people's princess. As always, I take my cue from the very valuable website called harrymarkle.wordpress.com. He points out she always has to be the center of attention, and that means pushing other royals out of the way. Well, that's what she does. If it means at a meeting where Harry is wearing his formal military attire, including a red jacket, she has to show up in a red dress, as if she's a member of the military as well. This woman, she could have had a lot. That's to say, Megan Mertz, but too grasping, too greedy, too eager, too enthusiastic. The British people these days are terrified of being called racists, but Meghan Markle's behavior has been such that people have decided they don't like her anyway, despite the fact that they're going to be called all manner of names. Let's go to the chat. KMG, would you agree that Trump's re-election odds have worsened considerably? No, I don't think they've worsened considerably. I think that they, in the short term, they're down. I hear this name Gavin Newsom mentioned a lot, governor of California. He's young, or reasonably young, and he's handsome. He's an idiot, but he looks good. Instead, the Democrats have decided that they are going to go all the way with Joe Biden, who he can't stop himself. What was he saying? That he was surprised that Bernie had joined Trump. He was talking to a woman who was a victim of gun violence and suggested that she buy a shotgun, that a shotgun would be better than what Biden insists on calling an AR-14. Since when did the neocons get behind Chinese communist bioweapon attacks anyway? Well, I don't know. The Never Trump people, as well as the media and the Democrats, apparently Trump invented this virus. That's the line that they're taking, pretty much. Traders shilling for economic collapse to make money on short positions should be treated the same as those consorting with the Chinese communists. You should include the show items in the description. Yes, I suppose you're right about that. I'll start that with tomorrow's show. Mark Frank says bedpan babies are nothing new in the history of royalty in Britain. The ordinary folk had a soft spot for Harry. The name Harry itself helped, but since he went woke, not anymore. Yes, I'm reminded of what James II, the last Catholic king of Britain, that the rumor was put out by the Protestants that he had not, in fact, come up with an heir, that the man who was later called the Old Pretender was not, in fact, a natural-born child of James II, that he had been secreted into the birthing room in a warming pan. Are you a fan of Ben Shapiro, Alex? Okay, this is a chat within the chat. Alex Delars says Trump is a bloviating buffoon who is mismanaging the most serious crisis of his presidency. Well, it's too early to say. It's simply too early to say. Philip Daniel says Gavin Newsom thinks that doctors should be able to prescribe housing. He tweeted about this. Yes, California is coming apart. It is, almost at a tipping point, you know, where it moves into dark ages, post-civilizational. The boob tube says maybe this is just a staged managed crisis to retract the overheated market and call for martial law while they arrest the traders that attempted to overthrow the duly elected government. That seems rather ambitious, I must say. I'll get back to the chat in just a minute. So let's talk about Joe Biden. Black people do not like Bernie Sanders. They just don't like him at all. Well, let's see. Alabama. If you look at these southern states, Mississippi, Biden got 81% of the vote, whereas Sanders got 14.8%. These are the kind of numbers one associates with, communist rigged elections. That's how much black people dislike Bernie Sanders. So I was following the results yesterday, and it struck me that, of course, Michigan went to Biden 53 to 36%. That's a blowout. A landslide is defined as anything more than a 10-point victory. And we're just seeing, landslides across the board last night, except in Washington State, where, very close race. Sanders with 32.7%, Biden with 32.5%, and 69% of the vote in. There was 69% of the vote in about 20 hours ago. So I checked it again this morning, and it said 69% of the vote in. And then it was explained to me, that there's so much postal voting in Washington State that the results will not be known for quite some time. Postal voting. We bring the fraud to you. There's no direct voting in the state of Oregon anymore? Something like that? So what that means is there will never be another fair election in Washington State or Oregon ever again. Because I suppose we learned this first in the West from Britain, that these ballots are collected and they're given to a community headman, I suppose you could call him, who fills out the ballots with whoever he wants to win. We saw this in the midterm elections, where, it turns out the Republicans were not getting as bashed as much as some people thought. Looked pretty good on election night. And then millions of ballots came in that were 60, 70, 80% or more for the Democrats. I mean, this is obvious corruption, but apparently it's too much to expect people to actually go to polls to vote. I would suggest that if it's too much for people to go to polls, then they shouldn't vote at all. Unlike in other places, apart from special elections, which are few, the dates of American elections are known into perpetuity. Also, if you're planning a vacation, well, then you don't get to vote. That's the way that I see it. Because, if voting were so important to you, then you would be there to vote on election day. Also, the election campaign, it goes to the very end, and there are often October surprises and the like. And if you used an absentee ballot, when you're not an absentee, then you're not really getting the full election campaign. I just find it absolutely shocking that in places like Washington, California, and Oregon, so it's the day after the election. Who won? We don't know yet. That's not the sort of thing one associates with a civilized country. There's a piece on CNN by David M. Perry He's characterized as a journalist and historian. He is a senior academic advisor in the history department of the University of Minnesota. And I see that he has a beard. He has one of those jazzer beards and an earring. So he is very a la mode. As the 2020 presidential election has narrowed to three men in their 70s, each surely experiencing the changes to body and mind that age brings to us all, if we're lucky enough to live that long, one thing has become clear. This will be the most ableist presidential election in at least modern U.S. history. Oh, here we go. Ableism is stigma, and, as I've been explaining to you all the last couple of weeks, stigma is the worst thing in the world. It is worse than any affliction, any disease, any epidemic. Ableism is stigma or discrimination based on perceptions about disability, whether accurate or not. Perceptions, eh? It's as pernicious and pervasive and widespread as any other prejudicial ideology like sexism and racism. This fellow, he teaches in history, and he does not appear to know what ideology means. Ideologies again. Okay, sexism and racism. And in fact, often these ideologies intersect. So they are intersectional. Today, we have three candidates whose behaviors, bodies, or known health histories make ableist attacks more likely. Our prejudices about both mental and physical disabilities. Everyone has prejudices. Prejudices are, for the most part, useful shorthand. But we've been told that all prejudices are bad. Can't have prejudices. They're fertile ground for rival politicians to plant seeds of doubt about their opponents, playing on our worst fears about our own aging and vulnerable selves, and ultimately obscuring the fact that there have been many disabled presidents. Lincoln had severe depression. FDR, of course, used a wheelchair and is the reason that so much of the White House is accessible. And although, in fact, there are plenty of disabling conditions that might not be reasonably accommodated in the Oval Office, campaigning based on innuendo, mockery, and smears about disability will make it much harder to have the difficult conversations about the fitness of these old men who are seeking the highest office in the land. Since the 2016 election, many liberals have too often resorted to alleging that Donald Trump is experiencing active symptoms of mental illness or experiencing age-related cognitive decline. Well, they have been, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence of it. See, they project. They always project. A few weeks ago, it was Bernie Sanders' heart in the spotlight when the senator refused to release some additional medical records. Now, with Joe Biden seemingly on the cusp of seizing the nomination, both Sanders supporters and former staff on the left, and both the president and his campaign via manipulated video, are making unsubstantiated claims about the former vice president's mental fitness. Well, as I explained yesterday in a remarkable story in the Washington Post at the end of last year, his doctor said, no, we didn't give Joe any cognitive tests because he's a candidate and he makes public appearances. So that should, clear up any difficulties about cognitive difficulties. Well, that's an interesting kind of diagnosis there. Oh, Biden has always stuttered. See, here we go again. See, I predicted this. Oh, you can't pick on a man. He's got a stutter. Yes, and? Oh, which can manifest in all kinds of non-standard speech patterns, like telling incredible stories about someone named Corn Pop and Pomade and Esther Williams and Rusty Flick Knives. Really? Or talking about the hair on his legs and children and the hair on his legs. He says Donald Trump's questionable statement shouldn't shock us because he's older, since he's always been a self-involved liar. Oh, I see. Joe Biden, of course, has repeatedly lied about his academic achievements, but no, it's Donald Trump that is the liar. Yeah, so I don't think that this fellow is what you would call disinterested. But as I say, you see the campaign. The groundwork has been laid for a campaign that you are not allowed to make fun of Joe Biden, because that would be ableism, which is just as bad as racism and sexism. I don't know, is it as bad as white supremacism? I guess we'll have to have some experts duke this out. Elizabeth Warren, of course, was touted last year by the media as the ideal candidate, and one of the reasons being that she was a woman, and the United States has never had a female president, and apparently it's long past time. There's a remarkable story in The Atlantic yesterday, and keep in mind, The Atlantic was once a serious magazine. For a long time, it was the most respectable magazine in America, and it has largely become a joke. I voted for Warren, my husband voted for Sanders, and I feel betrayed. Voting for a progressive woman felt like a chance so rare that it caused me to fume at my own husband for making a different decision, says Ellen O'Connell Whitted. Yes, Chesterton remarked that female suffrage was a bad idea for many reasons, one of which is that it introduces division into a family. So here we have this woman who's shortly to come out with a memoir about her experiences as a ballet dancer, and she is furious with her husband because he wouldn't be bullied into voting for Elizabeth Warren. Let's see. She says the numbers, that is to say, exit polls and the like, can't prove that men avoided Warren because she was a woman, and my friends' husbands insisted they preferred Sanders for substantive policy reasons. My husband, I had thought, understood without me having to explain that Warren not only represented the promise of the country's first female president, but also had a plan for all the issues that mattered to us, such as gun control and universal child care. When he voted for Sanders, even though he told me he still thought Warren would make the best president, I felt an irrational sense of abandonment. I wondered whether he and voters like him had cost Warren the nomination. She was nowhere even close. Look, she finished third in Massachusetts, where she is a sitting senator in her second term. She finished fourth in Oklahoma, where she was born and raised. And so it appears that the more people see of Elizabeth Warren, the less they like her. On Thursday at the news conference where she announced she was dropping out, Warren said, gender in this race, that is the trap question for every woman. If you say, yeah, there was sexism in this race, everyone says, whiner. And if you say, no, there was no sexism, about a bazillion women think, what planet do you live on? Imagine going public with this. Imagine, subjecting your husband to this humiliation because Elizabeth Warren fizzled. Let's see. She admits, I know Warren wasn't perfect, but neither were the other candidates. Yes, and she seemed willing to learn from her mistakes. She showed measured kindness and justified rage in her town halls and on the debate stage. She wasn't promising a revolution the way Sanders was, but in my mind, voting for a competent, radical woman was the revolution. To my husband, though, her qualifications were not enough, and most voters seemed to agree. Competent at what? She's not in an administrative capacity. It's not like she's a governor or even a mayor like Pete Buttigieg. She's a senator, and senators don't need to be competent. Oh, so let's go back into some history. My husband and I started dating just before the 2012 election. After the results of that election came in, he texted me that, yes, it was great that we got 4 more years of Barack Obama, but what he'd really be excited for was to vote for President Warren one day. Really? Did that really happen? Is that the nature of the conversations between these two? I reminded him of this recently. I bet she did. And he maintains that he would have liked to see her in the White House. But when we had the chance to choose, I saw him vote for strategy over idealism, a decision I suspect many felt forced to make after Warren went from frontrunner to underdog. After a few tearful conversations in the week leading up to Super Tuesday, I can just imagine. I could not make my husband understand what seemed so monumental to me about Warren's campaign. To him, what was important was avoiding a contested convention, and he told me he saw his vote for Sanders as one against Biden, the more moderate establishment candidate. And Bernie is one of the good guys, he said, but he doesn't get as much done as Liz, I replied weakly. What has, of course, Bernie's a senator too, but what has Liz got done? I mean, apparently she had a plan for that, even a plan for teenage girls who had been ghosted, as the kids like to say, by her boyfriend. What has she accomplished in government? But of course, one cannot, particularly if one is female these days, experience any kind of anguish without broadcasting it to the whole world. And I see that Willow Smith, who is one of the daughters of Will Smith, the former, A-plus actor, who seemed to be very busy these days. She had some hit some years ago, whipping her hair. It was really quite inane. Willow Smith is going to spend 24 hours in a box with boyfriend Tyler Cole to express their anxiety. It's an epidemic and people don't talk about it. Well, on the contrary, it seems as if they talk about little else. Willow revealed the tragic death of Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna, along with 7 others in a helicopter crash, helped inspire the exhibit. Well, if that's the source of your anxiety, there's really a simple solution to that. Don't use helicopters. Fans of the duo who cannot be in attendance in LA can watch it on a live feed as Willow hopes to start a conversation about mental health. Willow and boyfriend Tyler are also a musical duo called The Anxiety, as their collaborative album will be released after the 24-hour performance. They plan on spending 3 hours on 8 emotions: paranoia, rage, sadness, numbness, euphoria, strong interest, compassion, and acceptance. There will be one glass wall for viewers to check out the exhibit, as the other walls will be canvas for the artists to express themselves. You know, I remember, and I'm sure a number of people watching this have seen the famous Twilight Zone episode where Roddy McDowall is an astronaut who goes to Mars and there's a crash. And then he's rescued. And the Martians, they seem to be very friendly, suspiciously friendly. The episode, I believe, is called People Are the Same All Over. And, oh, look, they've got living quarters for him. Oh, and then it turns out he's in a zoo. That's the surprise ending. And you see, the Martians are just going to gawk through the glass at this strange creature. And I know, the surprise caused me a lot of anguish, because who wants to live in a zoo? Well, apparently people want to live in zoos now, whether they're actually in literal zoos, like a Willow Smith and her boyfriend, or whether they are in virtual zoos, like the writer for The Atlantic or people on social media. Here is everything that is going on in my life. Let me tell you about my difficulties with my husband. Let me tell you about them at great length, because I don't know. Studies show, and pretty much any man, if you ask him, will confirm this. What is he most afraid of? What does he most fear? He most fears being embarrassed in public. But I guess, woke people don't care about that. Because, if you're afraid of being embarrassed in public, I suppose there must be something wrong with you. You're too uptight. You're not open enough. It's all so tiresome. Let's go back to the chat. Willow and her white people problem. She's so privileged. John Miller says, Cato libertarians are the worst. Some of the worst economic policies are emanated from that think tank. Well, Cato has made it pretty clear now that they're just a cheering squad for the globalists, right? That the Koch brothers, I believe there's only one of them now, they were routinely described as being right-wing, but they don't like that designation anymore. John Miller says, I confess that I went through a libertarian phase in high school and college. Guilty. Well, I once went through a libertarian phase myself. I even once went through a neocon phase. In my defense, I'd say that this was in the 1970s and the 1980s when the neocons were a lot brighter than they are now, and they had interesting things to say on many issues instead of, faster, pussycat, kill. Let's see. Eternal Fisherman says, reason was my early obsession with history and finding out how Hoover's economic liberal policies failed during the Great Depression. James Burnham begins the Machiavellians by quoting from the Democratic Party platform of 1932, where they assail Herbert Hoover for his just out of control use of government, in an attempt to deal with an economic problem. And, the Democratic Party wasn't going to do that. And of course, they went much, much further than Hoover ever did. And Burnham uses that as a prime example of the difference between the formal meaning of words and the real meaning of words. So, Angela Merkel said a remarkable thing. 60 to 70% of the German population will be infected by the coronavirus. How on earth would she know that? I really get the impression that Angela Merkel doesn't like Germany and doesn't like Germans. She preferred the DDR. And of course, she got a PhD in the DDR, and one did not get a PhD in that realm without collaborating with the Stasi. It's that simple. After 1989, Angela Merkel's records mysteriously disappeared. She let in millions of fractious migrants to Germany. What? Because we can. And there's a famous video of her swatting away with extreme annoyance a German flag, because the EU flag is obviously superior. As I say, I don't think she likes Germany or Germans. So, if 60 to 70%, which is a solid majority, of Germans are going to get the coronavirus, I suspect that a great many of them are going to fall victim to despair. That is to say, well, if I'm going to get it anyway, what's the point in attempting to prevent getting it? This just seems a remarkably stupid thing to say. According to the story from, CNBC, Germany has so far reported 1,565 cases of the virus and 3 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins University. And the chancellor has come under fire for her government's handling of the response. When the virus is out there, the population has no immunity and no therapy exists, then 60 to 70% of the population will be infected. Wow, it's almost as if she's looking forward to it. That the coronavirus will, take over from, where the Russians ended in 1945. The process has to be focused on not overburdening the health system by slowing the virus's spread. It's about winning time. Yeah, not overburdening the health system. That could be sinister. Czech Prime Minister Andrej Babis has since been quoted by CTK as saying that Merkel's statements cause panic. Yes, indeed. Merkel said Berlin would spend whatever was necessary to contain the virus in Germany. How about closing the borders? Considered that? I know that the Schengen has become a religion in the EU. Oh no, we've never closed borders. Well, if you're willing to do whatever is necessary, how about that? Confirmed cases in Italy has surpassed 10,000, with deaths spiking to 631. Donald Trump is going to speak to the American people at 9 o'clock Eastern tonight. Let's see what he had to say on Twitter today. The media should view this as a time of unity and strength. We have a common enemy, actually an enemy of the world, the coronavirus. We must beat it as quickly and safely as possible. There is nothing more important to me than the life and safety of the United States. I'm fully prepared to use the full power of the federal government to deal with our current challenge of the coronavirus. You notice he still calls it the coronavirus and not the politically correct designation of COVID-19. I'll have more on that just in a moment. I want to thank all of our great government officials on the coronavirus task force who are working around the clock in response. Continue to check cdc.gov for updates. We have the greatest healthcare system, experts, scientists, and doctors anywhere in the world. Together, we will prevail. Seattle, which is ground zero in America. Restaurants struggle to survive as coronavirus turns Seattle into a ghost town. This is from CNN. The Pike Place Bakery sits in an area where tourists flock in Seattle. Lately, though, the whole area looks more like a ghost town. As coronavirus fears mount and officials encourage people not to gather in crowds, Piroshki, and other residents are struggling with a decline in customers. At least a 50 to 70% drop, says one of the bakery managers there. The first reported case of coronavirus in the United States was a man who lived near Seattle. That would be Kirkland, I guess. Many restaurants in Seattle reported a 40% drop in business last week. Restaurants are getting creative and changing how they do business to make sure they can stay open. Some restaurants are turning to takeout to keep up with the demand of hungry customers who are working from home to avoid the risk of coronavirus. Yeah, let's see. One of those restaurants is Tamari Bar, and I notice a bunch of characters at the bottom, which are Oriental characters. I really think that Oriental restaurants must simply be hammered at this time. But Italy has closed everything except for pharmacies and grocery stores. And, as I said earlier in this week, I don't know whether the European Union is going to survive this. And when I say survive, I'm talking about the short term. But let's talk about the stigma again, because again, that's the really serious problem. The director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Tuesday argued it was absolutely wrong for President Trump to label the 2019 novel coronavirus as the China virus. It's absolutely wrong and inappropriate to call this the Chinese coronavirus. I assume you would agree with me. This is what Lois Frankel, a Democrat from Florida, asked CDC Director Robert Redfield, who agreed. Yes, let's see. Oh, stigmatization. Yes. The World Health Organization named the disease COVID-19 to deter people from associating the virus with a location or group of people, which can ultimately lead to stigmatization. And we all know that the Spanish were stigmatized for decades, generations, after the Spanish flu that directly followed the Great War. I mean, people wouldn't tell you they were Spanish. They changed their names. They hid all evidence that they were Spanish or of Spanish descent. That's how strong the stigmatization was. As for the number of deaths caused by that stigmatization, I couldn't possibly guess, but I just have to assume that the trauma of all kinds was massive. CBS Los Angeles, San Gabriel Valley gun sales soar among Asian Americans who fear coronavirus-related attacks. David Liu, the owner of Arcadia Firearm and Safety, says his store has been very busy in recent weeks. He's seen as 10 times more customers than usual come through the doors of his business. Because of coronavirus, a lot of people start to worry, he said. The area has a high concentration of Asian Americans, and Liu said that many of his customers are afraid they may be targeted because of their ethnicity if a local outbreak of coronavirus occurs. I do worry, said Daniel Lim, who recently bought a gun for his wife at Arcadia. Lim says he wants his family to be able to defend themselves, and he fears coronavirus may spark a financial crisis that leads to social disorder. Lim isn't alone in thinking that buying a firearm may help him in the event of coronavirus-related attacks. We think it's the perfect time to get a weapon for ourselves, said another customer, Dirk Zhang, adding that his wife would never allow a handgun in their home until now. She's a little afraid of the outbreak of the virus. Let's see. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of my country, announced that the Canadian government was spending $1 billion to fight coronavirus. What's the money going to be spent on, though? Here's a story from the University of British Columbia. Could only look on, feeling helpless as COVID-19, you see, they're using the right designation, ravaged her home city of Wuhan, the epicenter of an outbreak that has killed more than 3,000 people and infected more than 90,000 globally. When the quarantine was first issued, I was so worried, said Can, an assistant professor in the UBC Department of Sociology. I was desperately trying to connect with my family in Wuhan to make sure they were okay. Watching from afar has been really hard. Today, Can was announced as one of the UBC researchers, along with Dr. Richard Lester, Dr. Srevinis Murthy, Natalie Pristajecki, and Dr. Mail Krajan, who are the principal investigators of teams collectively receiving more than $2.8 million in grants from the federal government to study COVID-19. Funding is focused on accelerating the development, testing, and implementation of measures to deal with the outbreak. This woman is a sociology professor. She's not a medical professional, but I guess the money has to be spread liberally, and I hope that she will help us deal with the stigmatization issue. This is going to be an enormous boondoggle. Also from my province, Royal Roads researchers, part of a team studying COVID-19 misinformation. Researchers from a Vancouver Island University are part of a team that has been awarded almost $500,000 to study misinformation, stigma, and fear related to the novel coronavirus known as COVID-19. The joint project between researchers from Royal Roads and Ryerson universities will receive approximately $478,000 in funding from the federal government, part of a $27 million initiative for research. The funds will be used to combat misinformation and develop online learning interventions that improve people's knowledge, skills, beliefs, and behaviors related to COVID-19. In a news release, Royal Roads University said the nationwide research team will develop bite-sized education initiatives, yummy, such as infographics and other digital media. Researchers will also study online social networks to improve people's understanding, knowledge, and beliefs about the novel coronavirus. Yes, no stigma. Don't mention China. China has nothing to do with this. Nothing at all. Stop mentioning China or else. We're not at the or else stage yet in Canada, but I suspect it can only be a matter of time. Last night, I found myself at a gun site. Don't ask me why. I was just following something. The PalmettoStateArmory.com. And apparently, you can buy Chinese type 56 SKS 7.62 times 39 military surplus rifles with spiker bayonets. Let's see. These are semi-automatic, magazine capacity 10 rounds. These rifles are military surplus and are in used condition and are sold as is. They will all come with heavy cosmoline on the exterior and internals of the rifle, along with varying degrees of markings on the wood stock. Some rifles include trench art, as well as issues with the finish. Now, there's a safety notice here. These rifles will all need to be taken apart and cleaned thoroughly before firing. Also, please remember that an SKS has a free-floating firing pin, which can cause slam fires if the firing pin is stuck in the outside position. A good rule that everyone should be following is always chamber a firearm in a safe direction. This is especially important with an SKS, as slam firing 10 rounds in an unsafe direction can be catastrophic, I'll say. We recommend you have your rifle checked by a competent gunsmith before firing. And so, questions and answers about the Chinese military surplus rifles. Does this setup come with coronavirus, or is that extra? Best answer, yes, it indeed comes covered with coronavirus-infested communist scum, aka Cosmoline. 1 or 2? According to Zero Hedge, a problem with the testing has to do with reagents and the lack of them. Even as VP Pence and CDC Director Redfield said that up to 4 million tests would be distributed to labs across the country in the coming days, they admitted that only 5,000 Americans had been tested for the virus so far. But as Politico reported last night, even as the Trump administration plays catch-up with distributing tests, its latest roadblock involves an inability to prepare samples for testing, creating uncertainty over the length of time for tests to produce results, which could also delay the response to the virus. The problem is related to something called reagents. The availability of those reagents is obviously being looked at. I'm confident, said Redfield, of the actual test that we have, but as people begin to operationalize the test, they realize there's other things they need to do the test. The growing scarcity of these RNA extraction kits is the latest trouble for U.S. labs, which have struggled to implement widespread coronavirus testing in the 7 weeks since the country diagnosed its first case. Epidemiologists and public health officials say that the delayed rollout, caused in fact by a botched CDC test, has masked the scope of the U.S. outbreak and hobbled efforts to limit it. If enough processing kits aren't available, the risk that testing will be disrupted is huge, said Michael Mina, Associate Medical Director of Molecular Diagnostics at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. One company that makes these critical reagents said that its products are currently on back order due to the enormous surge in the demand. Qiagen, that's a curious name, a major supplier of the kits, confirmed that its product is back ordered due to the extraordinary pace at which the world's increased coronavirus testing over the last few weeks. And of course, this is going to be blamed on Trump as well. CDC has plenty of money, enormous amounts of money, but apparently they didn't plan for, I don't know, anything unusual, anything novel, so to say, in the disease world showing up. I'm sure they had more glamorous things to do. Here's a story from the London Daily Star from Dawn Neeson. The human race is in grave danger of stupidity, not coronavirus. The human race is in grave danger. Thousands of people are showing severe symptoms already, and there is no known cure. No, not coronavirus, but sheer bloody stupidity. Never have so many brain cells been sacrificed on the altar of toilet paper fever. Come on, people, what is this about? Why, when you're warned that you may get a, for most folk, mild respiratory tract infection, do you instantly think that what you really need in your life is industrial supplies of bog roll? On what planet does that even begin to make sense? It's not as if our sexy new version of flu gives you a runny nose. It's mainly a dry cough and fever. She continues, a vaccine for COVID-19 is already being tested, and like every other flu before it, we will soon have this particular allergy under control. But alas, being a sheep-minded moron is terminal. The Germans actually have a word for this panic-vying, Hamsterkauf. It says what it does on the tin. Hamsters hoard stuff in their cheeks. They also have very small brains. Go figure. On International Women's Day, footage of females fighting over loo rolls in an Australian supermarket went viral. Each of them had trolleys full of the stuff, more than they'll ever need in a month of Sundays, let alone the 1 or 2 weeks we're all supposed to be now sofa surfing in front of Netflix. Curiously, not one of them had any food, which means they'll starve to death surrounded by a fortress of pulped trees and cardboard tubes. If toilet roll is plain bonkers, shall we add dried pasta to the mix? Supermarkets have also seen their shelves stripped of one of the most disgusting foodstuffs known to mankind. Even if you do cook it properly, it's still a glutinous mess of beige stuff. Plus, it's from Italy. You know, the country where everyone is dying. They're not, but trying to keep up the tradition of reacting like this is a zombie apocalypse. So if you do have cupboards groaning with penne and fusilli, you might want to give every piece a wipe down with the buckets of hand sanitizer you've also hoarded, which is where it really does get idiotic, because if you're one of those numpties who have cleared the shelves of stuff to decontaminate your hands with, you're depriving everyone else, which means they'll be wandering around happily infecting us all. Yay, congratulations on that one, you utter pile of pathetic pillockness. I say that the coronavirus panic has hit close to home, that I learned today that I will have to find a new place to live by the end of the month. There is no one on Vancouver Island who has been diagnosed with coronavirus, but nonetheless, this panic has resulted in me being evicted. It came as something of a bombshell, as you might imagine, but such is the way of the world today. I'll have more on this as it develops. Interesting story from CNN. Working from home is a lifesaver and a big danger. A woman, Joelle Renstrom, she's a Boston U teacher, and her argument is that this could lead to permanent changes in the workforce. That is to say that the workforce that we've known, it could be coming to an end because, okay, so now we're doing this, so why would we want to go back to the old way of doing things? She writes, the coronavirus has already galvanized and accelerated adoption of intermediary technologies that replace firsthand experiences. That trend will be difficult, if not impossible, to reverse, which ultimately may hasten the obsolescence of human workers. As companies and employers adapt to new circumstances, they'll notice the resulting benefits. The office electric bills shrink, workers quit less often, it's quieter. Whenever the coronavirus threat subsides, life and work may not simply resume as they were before. After companies go to the trouble of implementing telecommuting infrastructure for most of all of their employees, they may decide they prefer the current arrangement. At first glance, that might not seem so bad. Telecommuting increases productivity. Employees use fewer sick days and don't have to deal with commuting. The trend toward foregoing conventional office conditions has increased worldwide. According to a study from the International Workplace Group, 70% of people work remotely at least once a week, 53% telecommute half of the time, and 11% of workers never go to an office. While telecommuting works well for some, it doesn't for everyone. A 2016 study examined telecommuters from 1989 to 2008 and found that working remotely had widespread negative consequences, including people spending time working that they might otherwise have spent with family or friends because their work-life boundaries are more porous. They end up working longer hours. I thought I'd just talk about that for a minute. That I think this is a very serious problem for the reason that it used to be that work life and private life were very strongly demarcated. You didn't have your private life intruding on your work life and vice versa, as much as that was possible. For instance, not all that long ago, taking personal calls or making personal calls at work was very much frowned upon. I suppose, if it's your wife calling you up to say that, oh, it's been changed, you've got to pick up your daughter from someplace or whatever, make it short and sweet. But now people in offices often spend a great deal of time doing personal things. And the trade-off is that their work life has seeped into their private life. Oh, people taking work home, or the idea that workers are always on the clock. They must always be available. Now, it's true, working from home, uh, there's no commute, which is great. I guess I first started working from home in just before the year 2000, and it took me 45 minutes to an hour to get to work in the morning, and about the same coming back, and long lineups for the bus. Sometimes not getting on the bus because they were so full. Once getting elbowed in the head, as it was obvious that the space on the bus was running out. And I thought, who did this? And I thought, I got a pretty good idea who did this. It's some teenager or some ebullient young man in his 20s. It turned out to be a Chinese woman in her 60s or 70s who had elbowed me in the head in order to get ahead of me in the line. I didn't have to do that anymore. But I found that there was a problem because, okay, so there's no boss looking over your shoulder, right? So, yeah, I can put off doing the work, or I can do other things. I'll make up the time later. And then you find yourself, working till 9 o'clock or whatever because of all of the time that you have wasted earlier in the day. And, it's not even all that enjoyable because, oh, yeah, okay, I'll go to the store and I'll get something or whatever. And then you're feeling guilty because you should be at work. But again, this division seems to have been largely scrubbed, and I don't think that it's a good thing. The essay continues, people who telecommute may have trouble disengaging from work and from the technology that enables it, which contributes to the detrimental consequences of dwindling face-to-face time and personal interactions. Given the sudden and widespread implementation of telecommuting, many workers will soon notice how working remotely impacts their lives in ways they likely didn't predict, especially under the current circumstances. Well, this is a hobby horse of mine, that we have seen the attempt to shut out all people, all random interactions, that increasingly people want only to deal with people they have chosen to deal with. And even something as trivial as waiting in line, in a drugstore or whatever, and making small talk with a cashier is increasingly agony to people. Why is that person bothering me? I don't want to talk to that person. Just tell me how much I owe and let me get out of here. I think randomness is good for people in all sorts of ways. Randomness of human interaction, randomness of culture, etc., etc., etc. But no, we all want our niches now, and we don't want anyone else butting in. Now, a great many women feel that the social aspects of their job are particularly important to them. They see the people that they work with as a kind of surrogate family. I suppose some men feel this way, but not very many. That, women go on maternity leave, and you can see them just chafing at the bit to get back to work, to get back to the old gang. And I suspect that working from home, telecommuting, is going to be very painful for a lot of women. In her book, Reclaiming Conversation, The Power of Talk in the Digital Age, Sherry Turkle, an MIT professor, says that when humans rely on technology to mediate our interactions, we forget how essential face-to-face conversation is to our relationships, our creativity, and our capacity for empathy. Those interactions are crucial to human happiness. Well, what is the meme is that only old people use their cell phones, their mobile phones, to actually make calls, that this has been replaced by texting. Texting is not ideal. It is very far from ideal because it is very low informational. The best kind of communication is two people who can see each other in a room. Why is that the best? Well, because you get the body language. Body language tells you an enormous amount about what the other person is thinking or feeling. Second best form of communication is voice communication, because then you get the nuances which are associated with the human voice. Text is the worst because it is very difficult to come. It is very easy to come to the wrong conclusion about a person's intentions. What is this, a joke? Is this an insult? Etc. Etc. This is why, from the very beginning of the internet, you've had flame wars, because people, if they're speaking, particularly if you're speaking face to face, people can introduce nuance into what they're saying, and it's understood. But there's little or no room for nuance in internet conversation, and I suppose that's how we got emojis. But now emojis have become what, an art form in their own. The SAS writes, as a university professor, my days consist of social interactions with students and colleagues. I generally find those conversations and the resulting relationships stimulating and rewarding. Well, I'm glad to hear this, because I worked at a university for 12 years and I knew a lot of professors. And I got the impression that a great many of the professors thought that the only problem with working at a university was the students. If you could just get rid of the students, then everything would be wonderful. The coronavirus situation means that countless teachers like me face the possibility of standing in front of a camera instead of a classroom. I prefer doing that to canceling class, but I can't help wondering whether my job, along with so many others, is about to undergo a profound and potentially permanent change. Indeed, if all this can be done in front of a camera, why do we need physical universities at all? I see that, I guess in Seattle, they're not going to be playing, there's not going to be fans for the baseball games. What they're talking about, March Madness, college basketball, what, there's going to be no fans there. Again, as previously mentioned, I see the chance for a tremendous permanent change there. Because people get used to doing something, or they get used to missing something, and then they begin to think, why was this ever such an obsession with me in the first place? We've seen with the NFL that attendance has been plummeting in recent years. Even with the Jumbotron, obviously you get a much better look at the game from watching it on television, especially, with the replays and the slow motion replays. Yes, there is a thrill to actually being in the stadium, but given how fans are gouged these days by the teams, even those people having their cookouts in the parking lot being gouged now, that a lot of people might decide, how much am I paying for season's tickets? And how much does it cost on top of that, with gasoline and parking and the merch and the food, etc.? And they may just decide, nah, I'm not going to do that anymore. It seems that coronavirus it really could make a dent in scale. But I don't know, as Kunstler suggested on Monday, he's pessimistic about this because the vested interests have decided that scale is how they make the most money. Yes, it's more efficient, and we get to claw more of it. We get to hoover more of that money into our pockets. Someone like a toll keeper like Mike Bloomberg is worth $60 billion. It's really remarkable. So again, I remain cautious about coronavirus. And I see. Oh, here we go. Bloomberg doesn't want to let me see a story for some reason. A story where I already was at. Oh, I should mention. I talked about this package from Amazon yesterday. It was going to be delivered by UPS, and I might have to leave because of the package. Well, the package did not arrive yesterday, and I called them after 7 o'clock. Oh, we're going to put a priority on this. Well, it didn't arrive by noon, and I called, and oh, the priority wasn't added to it. I will do that now. When is it going to be delivered? Within an hour, I was told. Well, it was not delivered within an hour. It seems to be in some form of limbo. Do any people, well, obviously people who are listening to this, watching this, they drink energy drinks. Could you tell me why you drink energy drinks? Why would you prefer to drink an energy drink rather than, say, a Coke or a Pepsi? Because I don't get it myself. I was thinking about energy drinks because a energy drink that I have heard of was sold to Pepsi for, and if this Bloomberg story ever comes up, what was it, like $3.5 billion, something like that. And it turns out that this energy drink company, Rockstar, it is owned by, or founded at least by, Russ Weiner, the son of conservative talk show host Michael Savage. Someone in chat I take part in, direct messages, had something interesting to say about that. Michael Savage, who is a nutritionist, I believe, certified nutritionist, something like that. He took a dim view of food as being addictive. That food has been scientifically designed. You got to have that corn syrup. You got to have that sugar. You just can't stop eating it. And so this fellow asked, "What about energy drinks?" And so Michael Savage blocked him. Again, I was thinking, what was the first energy drink? Well, Gatorade, wasn't it? First energy drink. It is owned by Pepsi as well. And Gatorade was devised in 1965, supposedly scientific. Let's see, from the Wikipedia entry. Some were skeptical that the product's effect was anything more than a placebo effect. The leader of the team of inventors, Robert Cade, said, if you told a football player that you were giving him Demerol to relieve pain and you gave him a placebo instead, there's about a 30% chance the placebo will relieve the pain as much as taking Demerol would have. Gatorade, what does it have? Electrolytes like Brondo from Idiocracy? Apparently, an Orange Bowl college football game was won in 1967, and the Yellow Jackets, Georgia, I guess, their coach said, when asked why his team lost, replied, "We didn't have Gatorade. That made the difference." Not your bad calls, coach. It was the Gatorade. The original Gatorade is based on oral rehydration therapy, a mixture of salt, sugar, and water with the citrus-based flavoring and added food coloring, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in it. The presence of calorie, sugar, and sodium in Gatorade products has drawn attention from public school constituents who have raised questions over whether the sale of Gatorade beverages should be permitted in such schools. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when governor, sponsored a bill which proposed a ban on the sale of sports drinks in California schools. There are 34 grams of sugar in one 20-ounce bottle of regular Gatorade. The maximum amount of sugar a person should eat in a day is 25 grams for women and 37.5 grams for men. According to the American Heart Association, the recommended maximum amount of sugar for women is about 6 teaspoons and about 9 teaspoons for men. So, a study on nearly 11,000 teens in 2012 reported that teens put on even more weight if they drank a bottle of sports drink every day averaging 3.5 pounds for every sports drink consumed per day. The researchers concluded we need to educate parents and clinicians about what constitutes a sugary drink. Sports drinks are promoted by professional athletes as a healthy drink, but they don't really need to be used by kids unless they are continually exercising for long periods or they're in hot climates. Well, people like sweet beverages. That's why Pepsi won the Pepsi Challenge, which led to Coke's disastrous decision to change the formula of Coca-Cola. What they didn't understand is that in any one-time blind testing test, a majority of people will always choose the sweeter product. That doesn't mean that over time that they will prefer the sweeter product. And in terms of soft drink, clearly they don't, because Coke remains more popular than Pepsi, which is sweeter and flatter. But I suspect that these sports drinks took off. Well, they were novel, but also because, oh no, I'm not drinking a Coke, I'm not drinking a Pepsi, I'm not drinking a Dr. Pepper or whatever. This is science. In Silicon Valley, the HBO show, there was an episode involving a energy drink company, which was called Homicide, which Guilfoyle called the extra douchey energy drink. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Well, Wikipedia is going to tell me what Bloomberg will not let me see. PepsiCo announced that it agreed to acquire Rockstar for $3.85 billion. Whenever I go to a convenience store or, supermarket, how many different kinds of colored water are there? Increasingly, the soft drinks are being squeezed out by, okay, this is water, and I don't know, it's yellow or green or blue, and it has something added to it. So you definitely want to pay a premium for that. Again, as with so many things I talk about, I suspect that this is a generational thing. Let's see, besides caffeine and sugar, Rockstar energy drink contains a variety of herbs, including Panax ginseng, ginkgo biloba, milk thistle extract, and guarana seed. Ooh, how about that? And it also includes 1,000 milligrams of taurine, which is the active ingredient in Red Bull. Is it not? It's named after the Latin taurus, a cognate of the Greek, which means bull or ox, and was first isolated from ox bile. It used to be associated with children that they would, ask for purple when they meant grape or whatever, or ask similar things. But apparently that's how Rockstar energy drink works, which I find very amusing. Rockstar cans are known for their bright, distinct colors. The various Rockstar flavors are frequently referred to by the color of the can, more so than the specific name. E.g., Zero Carb is Blue Rockstar, Recovery Lemonade is Yellow Rockstar, Perfect Berry is Pink Rockstar as well. As with all energy drinks, Rockstar can cause jitteriness, anxiety, and high blood sugar levels. If mixed with alcohol, it may also mask the level of alcohol intoxication. There are no known side effects if used in moderation. Several alcoholic versions of Rockstar are available in Canada. An alcoholic version in the US was discontinued in 2007, probably in response to criticism that young people were confusing the alcoholic version with the regular one. Well, how young are we talking about? You're not allowed to buy alcohol in my province unless you are 19 years of age. Rockstar Original was named Worst Energy Drink by Men's Health magazine for having 280 calories due to 67.5 grams of sugar. Monster Energy Low Carb with 20 calories was suggested as a replacement. Rockstar has introduced a line of low-calorie energy drinks that include electrolytes. They got electrolytes. Called Rockstar Recovery, partially in response to these terms. So let's see what the chat has to say. Okay. Nope. Glitches? What's the glitches here? Oh, okay. KMG viral now, don't you know? I'm sure that can't be correct. Really? What, is there some sort of outstanding number of people watching? Let me go and see. Well, it says that there's 90 watching. That doesn't seem very viral to me. Are you having me on, people? Let's see. Energy drinkers just jumped on. Oh, maybe that could be. This what it says. Wait, 800 plus people? What? I don't know. I would imagine Rockstar makes a high margin on their drinks. Yes, I would imagine that as well. Although I have never had an energy drink. Never. I think many years ago, I may have had Gatorade because someone had bought some and was passing it around. But no, actually, I drink a lot of tea, which has caffeine in it. So I guess, I would get energy from that. But of course, tea, which I take without milk or sugar, well, that's 0 calories, essentially. It works well for me. But, I think part of the energy drink craze has to do with the decline in smoking, particularly among younger people, that they need something to do with their hands. I mean, I noticed a few years ago that every young person seems to carry around some sort of water bottle. Is there some sort of great fear out there of dehydration? What would people be doing that they would need, to carry around 12, 16, 20 ounces or more of water with them? How are you going to get dehydrated? And, if you suddenly felt that you were dehydrated, were you going, if you live in a city, are you going to find yourself in a wilderness where it's more than a few blocks from a store where you can buy some sort of beverage? I don't know. I find it really funny, really amusing. And as I say, I think it has to do with a large part of young people not smoking anymore or not smoking as much as they used to. And so they got to have the water bottles or the energy drinks, something to keep in the hand. 775 now. Oh, 619. Okay. Okay. Let's see if there's anything. Bottled water started with the Gulf War. Okay. Well, sure. If you're in the infantry, yes, I can see the need for bottled water. If you're not in the infantry, and if you're not, hiking, say, uneven ground, very hot day, again, Ricky Bullock says, I had a 5-hour energy once to play in a poker tournament after I'd already been awake for 24 hours, but it didn't do anything. Okay. Okay, let's get back to the show here. And what are we going to say? Oh, yes. Exciting new streaming service. There are so many of them. Of course, streaming services were supposed to be the antidote to cable. What, I'm paying $150 a month for cable, and they're charging me for the Home and Garden channel? I'm not going to watch that. I don't watch these cooking channels, but I got to pay for them. But it turns out, because of intellectual property restrictions, there seem to be innumerable streaming services. And of course, some weeks ago, Red Letter Media did a very funny video talking about how easy it would be to pay much, much more than your old cable bill just to sign up to a bunch of streaming services. So, Quibi, is that how it's pronounced? From Zero Hedge, meet the new streaming service for short attention spans and ridiculous content. Quibi, I'm going to call it Quibi. It's a company that is trying to capitalize on the ever-deteriorating attention span of the consumer. The service aims to compete with TikTok And YouTube, by creating professional content people can watch on their phones, that's cut down to 7-minute segments, far shorter than the traditional 22-minute TV shows. The platform is also taking advantage of consumers' incessant need for the ridiculous. Some of the ideas it is launching its service with include a cooking contest where competitors are slammed in the face with meals fired out of a cannon, a show about customized dog houses called Barkitecture, and a home renovation program that removes the stains from houses where murders were committed. And there's a tweet from Quibi. These dog houses are off the leash luxurious because today and every day is Love Your Pet Day. Barkitecture, coming April 2020, only on Quibi. They seem to be so determined to tempt God. And of course, Wall Street loves the idea. Quibi has already raised $2 billion from investors, both on Wall Street and in Hollywood. The platform starts up next month. On Friday, the company finally revealed what its programming slate would look like, led by movie mogul Jeffrey Katzenberg and former HP Inc. CEO Meg Whitman. The service will also offer scripted shows and news programs. Meg Whitman, I've heard of that woman. She ran for governor of California, and she did not do well. Despite spending more of her money on the race than any other political candidate spent on a single election in American history, including $144 million of her own fortune, she was defeated by Democratic former Governor Jerry Brown, 54 to 41%. Yeah, she was at HP, Hewlett Packard, and she ran the company into the ground. And of course, I guess you get rewarded for that sort of thing today. I see she's on the board of Procter & Gamble, Dropbox, and IGC. She has a net worth of $3.8 billion, which is certainly a handsome reward for taking one of America's great companies, Hewlett Packard, and driving it into the ground. But I don't really understand how business works anymore. I thought it was success that it was supposed to be rewarded. Let's see. Reese Witherspoon will star in a show about the females of the animal kingdom. And Sophie Turner will star in a show where she plays a plane crash survivor trying to navigate and survive in the wilderness. Celebrities like Mark Wahlberg, Jennifer Lopez, and Idris Elba have all signed on to make shows with the platform as well. The service is planning on launching with 50 shows on April 6th, which will then quickly turn to 175 original shows with 8,500 quick bites of content. Well, what does it cost? It costs $5 a month. And Zero Hedge asks the question whether or not the consumer will shell out for short, sensational content. Our take, why would they? It's available all for free on YouTube and Twitter already. But far be it for us to underestimate the stupidity of the consumer. We'll check back in April to see how the platform is holding up. Well, obviously, there's going to be an enormous shakeout of these platforms because there are so many of them. But guess what? There's a legal problem with this already. According to Deadline, just like Quibi's turnstile feature will let you flip your phone seamlessly from vertical to horizontal while watching the upcoming Punk'd revival and more, tech firm Eco on Tuesday flipped the script on the Jeffrey Katzenberg-founded streamer with a lawsuit of its own. Coming one day after Quibi sued the Israeli company in federal court, Eco today filed a suit to shut down the April 6th launch of the well-founded Meg Whitman-run mobile streamer. So Katzenberg, he actually has a reputation in the entertainment industry, but they decided to lead here with Meg Whitman. Okay. Perhaps it's just, I recall that Steve Ross, I believe his name was who was the chairman, the CEO of Time Warner, at a time when video games had become enormously popular and were just making stupendous amounts of money for companies. Steve Ross thought that software designers, they want money, like they want points, they want royalties. This is outrageous. He called them towel designers. And so maybe it's maybe if you're known for having driven a technology company into the ground, then obviously, they want to put you in charge of an entertainment company because, that makes sense. Let's see. Patent laws of the United States, misappropriation of trade secrets under the Defend Trade, going into great detail in the suit of ex-Snapchat staffers who moved on to Quibi and are alleged to have brought the notion of the turnstile tech with them after an eco demonstration. The plaintiffs today also claimed again that they filed for a patent for the horizontal to vertical video technology in 2015. They say that Quibi did not file for a patent covering the same technology until May 2019, which ECO said came after a confidential demo by ECO of the technology to key Quibi top executives, including some of Quibi's so-called patent inventors and Quibi chairman and founder Jeffrey Katzenberg. I'm thinking about everyone suing everyone. Everyone in business suing everyone, claiming you stole this, you stole this, you stole this. Steve Jobs famously claimed that Bill Gates had stolen the GUI, the graphical user interface, from Apple. Bill Gates quite rightly pointed out, no, we both stole it from Park Xerox. But let's look at the car. You imagine if, the things that we associate with the car, the internal combustion engines, all of the parts thereof, things like stick shift. No, we've patented the stick shift. You're going to have to come up with some other arrangement for changing the gears on your car. Well, luckily, society was not as litigious then. Let's see, even though they canceled their big April 5 red carpet event due to concerns over the coronavirus, isn't that the perfect excuse now? If there's anything you don't want to go to, if there's anything you don't want to do, it's coronavirus. It's my grandmother died. It's only on a global scale. Oh, coronavirus, yes. Yes, of course, that makes sense. Can't be too careful. Quibi is still set to debut April 6th with a lineup of 51 shows from creators, including Jennifer Lopez, Chrissy Teigen, Chance the Rapper, Liam Hemsworth, Sophie Turner, Lena Waithe. Oh, you've seen that woman? She is terrifying looking. Nicole Richie, and the aforementioned Reese Witherspoon, and shows including Survive, Most Dangerous Game, Thanks a Million, Chrissy's Court, Murder House Flip. Oh, come on, seriously? Late Night, The Replay by ESPN, and others. The mainly mobile platform is offering a 90-day free trial to those who sign up on its website before April 6th. It's $4.99 with ads and $7.99 no ads. Is it really good idea to be staring from a long distance at a tiny little screen for hours at a time? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Oh, let's talk about the boomers. Let's talk about the boomers because we all hate the boomers, right? I mean, I'm a boomer, and even I'm not all that keen on them. They're insufferable in many, many ways. But Steven Pinker has decided that the boomers are the greatest. They're just the greatest. And the world is better than it's ever been. The piece in Newsweek magazine, which is still around apparently, called OK Millennial, Boomers Are the Greatest Generation in History. Okay, boomer is what younger people say when they want to dismiss boomers as being out of touch or stuck in our boomer ways. Sort of this generation's version of if you say so, old timer. It's not exactly an ageist insult. Well, it is, but it sure ain't a compliment. Fine, okay, we get it. Have fun. But remember one thing before slinging insults. The world, according to Harvard psychology professor Steven Pinker and many others, is better off now than it's been at any time in history. That's right, ever. And I contend it's because of boomers. Boomers are the greatest generation the world has ever known, the most innovative, the most caring, the hardest working. That may seem a bit much, but to quote the pitcher Dizzy Dean, it ain't bragging if you can back it up. Steven Pinker, I know he has a big cult. I can't take him seriously. That I'm going to read from David Berlinski's book, The Devil's Delusion, which is about atheism. That Stephen, if the facts about the 20th century are an inconvenience for scientific atheism, suitably informed thought may always find a way to deny them. The psychologist Steven Pinker has thus introduced into the discussion the remarkable claim that, quote, something in modernity and its cultural institutions has made us nobler. On the scale of decades, comprehensive data again paint a shockingly happy picture, unquote. Some of the evidence, Pinker goes on to say, has been under our nose all along. Conventional history has long shown that in many ways we have all been getting kinder and gentler. Cruelty as entertainment, human sacrifice to indulge superstition, slavery as a labor-saving device, conquest as the mission statement of government, genocide as a means of acquiring real estate, torture and mutilation as routine punishment, the death penalty for misdemeanors and differences of opinion, assassination as the mechanism of political succession, rape as the spoils of war, pogroms as outlets for frustration, homicide as the major form of conflict resolution, all were unexceptionable features of life for most of human history. But today, they are rare to non-existent in the West, far less common elsewhere than they used to be, concealed when they do occur, and widely condemned when they are brought to light. Berlinski comments, here is a rather more accurate assessment of the 20th and early 21st centuries. Anyone persuaded that they represent a shockingly happy picture should make the modest imaginative effort to discern the immense weight of human misery conveyed by these statistics. And he has a chart here. I won't go through all of it. I'll just read the highlights. First World War, 15 million deaths. Russian Civil War, 9 million deaths. Soviet Union, Stalin's regime, 20 million deaths. Second World War, 55 million deaths. People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong's regime, 40 million deaths. Congo Free State, 8 million deaths. Turkish massacres of Armenians, 1.5 million deaths. Violent deaths through warlordism, civil war in China, 1928 to 1937, 3.1 million deaths. Korean War, 2.8 million deaths. The Second Indochina War, 3.5 million deaths. Nigeria, the genocide of the Biafrans, he has it as 1 million. Other estimates are higher than that. Bangladesh, 1.25 million. Khmer Rouge, 1.65 million. The Sudan, from 1983 onwards, 1.9 million. Kinshasa, the Congo, 1998. From then on, 3.8 million. And it goes on and on and on. And Berlinski concludes, in considering Pinker's assessment of the times in which we live, the only conclusion one can profitably draw is that such an excess of stupidity is not often to be found in nature. What do they call this? Positive suggestion, Couéism. In every day, in every way, things are getting better and better. And I'm reminded of a satire of that, which appeared about a decade ago on the show Community. One of my favorite episodes. It was called Regional Holiday Music. It was a takedown of the show Glee, which all good people hate. And glee is shown as a kind of a virus, a virulently infectious disease, which reduces people to idiots. And Pierce Hawthorne, who was played by Chevy Chase, they get him in by singing a paean to the virtues of the boomers. And Annie says, Pierce, they're just trying to pander to your demographics' documented historical vanity. Resist. Yes, but Troy and Abed have made up a song, and it's called Baby Boomer Santa. And it goes like this. Santa Claus was born in 1945. He had a boogie-woogie Coca-Cola army jive. And when the commies gave the polio to Doris Day, Santa helped the Beatles chase McCarthy away. That baby boomer Santa, he never gonna die. Santa fought at Woodstock and Vietnam and smoked a ton of acid and burned his bra. And then in 1970, he did more drugs and his hair stayed long and he grew a mustache. Baby boomer Santa, he's going to stay alive. And they go into little Bee Gees. Santa invented Spielberg and microchips. Santa invented Coca-Cola and aerobics. He made the Iron Curtain and the Gremlins too, fake butter and AIDS and Twin Peaks. Baby boomer Santa, thank you for MTV. Baby boomer Santa, thank you for everything. And then Pierce closes it off. You're welcome. You're welcome for everything in the world. You're welcome. You're welcome for all that I bring to the world. I'm Baby Boomer Santa. I bring the gift of the world. Yes, life was pitiful before the boomers, apparently. They're trying to appeal to Pierce. And, well, after all, your generation invented music. And he said, invented? No, perfected. Maybe. One gets this vibe of very much from people like Steven Pinker and Sam Hill. Now, it's all materialism for these people. That's all they care about. If it can't be measured, then it doesn't exist. It's useless. Let's see, millennials seem to think their challenges are greater than those any other generation has faced. I don't really think that's the claim that millennials make, but never mind that. Not really. The Great Recession, nothing compared with the Great Depression. There weren't boomers around then. Although the way the markets have been behaving lately, you may get there yet. The wealth gap, today it's actually pretty close to historical averages. Oh, I see. We're back to the Gilded Age now. Let's not talk about that democratizing period there, that golden age, or roughly 1945 to 1975 or 1980, when ordinary people could live well, and it was just sort of assumed that ordinary people who worked with their hands, could live well, own their own houses. Wife didn't have to work. They had lots of kids. Yeah, that actually happened in the United States and Canada. Student loan debt is $1.6 trillion. Over the next 30 years, boomers will pass down $68 trillion as part of the great wealth transfer. How do they know that? How do they know that? Because the longer the boomers live, and the boomers are determined to live forever, the less there is going to be available for them to give. It's already become a problem for would-be home buyers that there used to be a reasonable expectation that one's parents would die by a certain age, and they would leave you money, which you could then convert into a house. Well, no, that doesn't happen all that often anymore. And as the boomers are living into their 80s and 90s, they spend many years living in facilities which are exceedingly expensive because of the level of care that is required. There's more. Opioids, we had heroin and crack. You're missing the point, Sam Hill. Heroin and crack, are associated with criminals. And opioids are associated with people who are not criminals. We were the population pig and the economic python. Competition was fierce. Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. We had Richard Nixon, George Wallace, Lester Maddox, and Richard Daley. Richard Daley, was he really that such a bad man? What about the fact that boomers get an outsized proportion of government benefits, such as Social Security and Medicare, what some call boomer socialism? Well, that's true, but would millennials rather we went back to the old system where the older generation lived with their adult kids who cared for them? Don't think so. Oh, no, you wouldn't want that personal contact. You want professionals. You want people being paid to look after your relatives. It's too embarrassing otherwise. That is not to say your generation doesn't face problems or that they're not important. Some, like artificial intelligence, climate change, and the redux of autocracy, rise to the level of existential. The redux of autocracy. Does he believe that, this fellow believe that the United States of America is an authoritarian regime? Perhaps he does. The hard truth, every generation faces existential crises. No, this is a very modern way of thinking. That's simply not true. You think the bubonic plague and AIDS weren't existential crises? He's comparing the bubonic plague and AIDS? Seriously? AIDS turned out to be not as advertised. How about Hitler or communism? Boomers lived under the very real threat of a nuclear war that would have killed everything and turned the planet into a ball of ice. In 1972, the Club of Rome published The Limits to Growth, which predicted that the world would begin running out of resources by 2008. And yeah, how did that prediction work out? But wealth and income, yeah, the growing wealth gap, it's not so bad. Oh, look at phone usage. Apparently, it's really cheap to speak on the phone now. You see, is it really necessary for people to be on the phone all the time? But again, as I mentioned, apparently it's only old people who use their phones to make voice calls. But not that long ago, people got along just fine without these devices, which are constantly in their hands. I understand the convenience, but people did other things with their time. There was typically one telephone in a house, and if someone was on the telephone, you just have to wait your turn. And I suppose you discovered, if you were interested in such things, that what seemed so very important, a message, was not really all that important. How about safety and security? Actually, America's getting safer. The murder rate in 1969 was about 70 people per million versus 50 now. Yeah, and there's a reason for that, which is tremendous advances in emergency technology and in surgery learned on battlefields. The murder rate isn't representative of violence. If you want to throw in attempted murder and the like, yeah, then you get a better picture. The burglary rate was 9,841 versus 376 now, a 62% drop. Yes, and the reason for this, well, there's several reasons for this. There are large parts of every city which are effectively no-go zones for decent people. Got lots of downtowns. People do not go downtown anymore because the bad people are there. The bad people are hanging around on the streets. As far as their homes, people have armored their homes almost. You got to have the burglary package. You got to have the prevention package. You've got to, here's the code you have to memorize before you leave the house. You know, that sort of thing, leading to all sorts of embarrassment that what? You left the home, you left, you went outside at 11:30. Why would you go outside at 11:30? You got the alarm on. You scared everyone in the house, etc., etc. And the average person today lives to be 79 years old, 8 years longer than in 69. Some of the gain is because of better health care. Many of the diseases that affect us, like polio, are no longer an issue because of vaccinations. 5-year cancer survival rates are up from around half to over 2/3. You know, this assumption that we want people to be living longer and longer and longer and longer, is there an ideal cutoff point there? Because, you know, most people Well, I mean, you see with Joe Biden, but he's 77 years old, and he's become a laughing stock because he seems to be unable to come up with, say, 2 or 3 sentences in a row without some sort of howler. Is that really such a great condition to be in? I know of a case personally of a fellow. I didn't know the person. I knew a woman who worked in this facility. I believe he was 94 years old, and I guess he decided he didn't want to live anymore. And it's not like he slashed his wrists or anything like that. It's just that food would be presented to him, and he wouldn't eat it. He just stopped eating. So the staff of the facility or the leadership decided to intubate him at the age of 94. Again, though, with the boomers, baby boomer Santa is never going to die. That they really think that there's going to be a cure for death. It's just around the corner, and you wouldn't want to miss out. Well, I've explained on another stream. Imagine that people live to 150, and when I say live to 150, let's say for the first 130 years of their lives, they were as healthy as one could expect to be, now, up to the age of, I don't know, 60 or something. Can you imagine having to work for over 100 years? Can you imagine the effect that would have on people? What are we going to have people? Are they going to get married 5, 10, 20 times? Or are they going to lose track of all the relationships that they've had? I mean, can you imagine getting fired at the age of 100 and then having to find another job? Or breaking up with your wife at the age of 100 and I suppose I better get out there and find someone else. I suspect that if people actually could live or did live to the age of 150, suicides would run off the chart because of people deciding that they just couldn't handle effectively, the anguish that is associated with life, the various disappointments and the like, doubled, that they simply couldn't handle that. I also suspect that people would be absolutely terrified. I mean, sometimes people are crossing the street and they don't look to the left and to the right, and they get flattened by a car. But, imagine if you could expect to live to be 150 and, you got flattened by a car when you were 23. As you're dying there on the street, you feel pretty stupid, wouldn't you? All sorts of things are. Riding a motorcycle is dangerous. Riding a bicycle is dangerous. I just imagine a terrified society, an absolutely terrified of society. Oh, let's see. Let's get back to Sam Hall. They call the 1950s the golden age of television. Pish. This is the golden age of television and movies and music and books and probably just about every other cultural vector you can think of. This is the golden age of culture, better creative output, better performers, but you have all that because of us. Let's see. Let's talk about books. Poetry is dead as an art form. The short story is dead as an art form. The novel is nearly dead as an art form. Once the boomers start dying, like in a hurry, who's going to be reading classical history and military history? What are we going to have? We're going to have self-help books and memoirs all about how miserable one's childhood was. The golden age of movies. So, yeah, let's think of all of the tremendous movies that have been made during this century. Have you made your own list? And music. Well, in terms of serious music, classical music, what do they play? They still, putting out Beethoven sets. How many, sets of the 9 Beethoven symphonies have there been? Hundreds, literally hundreds. So why would they continue to put out sets of Beethoven symphonies, Mahler symphonies, Schubert symphonies, Brahms symphonies, Mendelssohn symphonies, etc.? Because there aren't people writing music today, serious music, that people are interested in. And you can say, oh, look at Philip Glass. Well, I love Philip Glass to death. He's over 80 years old. How old is Steve Reich? I mean, the minimalists are not going to be around for much longer. And what followed in the wake of the minimalists? In terms of popular music, it's not even designed to be good anymore. It is designed to be high fructose corn syrup for adolescent girls. That's all that it is. Yeah, there's some good TV shows on, but not very many of them are that good. But this fellow actually thinks that culture is better than it's ever been. When was the last time that you heard anyone, having a discussion about a movie that wasn't, wow, you see the explosions there? Or, wow, she looked really hot in that spandex. I mean, beyond that, a serious discussion about a movie that someone has seen that, raises possibilities that people want to talk about. No, no, no. Culture is not supposed to exercise people's brains anymore because that's too hard. It's become prole child. Oh, geez, look at this guy. We boomers don't like rules. Yeah, there's only one rule. There are no rules. Wow. Mind blown. Especially dumb ones. We broke down the soft barriers between genres, mixing rock and folk and blues and classical. We showed sex in movies, real sex, and that's a good thing. Why is that a good thing? It's worth noting that it's not just entertainment where we have more choice. Why is infinite choice considered to be a good thing? You cannot have a culture with infinite choice because in order to have a culture, you have to have people listening to or reading or watching the same things. In 1970, a typical grocery store had 6,000 items. Today, a regular grocery store has about 40,000 items, and a Walmart supercenter has 120,000. Well, on the one hand, you have the collapse of religion, the collapse of authority. We're seeing, as mentioned previously in this show, human contact disappearing. But there is so much that you can buy at Walmart. I really can't take materialists seriously. I really can't do that. As far as living forever goes, I've long believed, and I understand that some scientists believe this too, that that death is written into our DNA. That something is going to get you by 100. That's the max. Yes, there's some people who live past that. Have you ever seen them? They're all shrunken. And they have these very high voices like this. Yeah. But the baby boomer Santa ain't never going to die. When I was young, there were 3 TV networks, and you'd maybe have a couple of independent stations, so there wasn't much choice. And one chafed. I want to watch what I want to watch. Well, I was exposed to a great deal of material that I wouldn't have chose for myself, and I was much better off for it. Also, as I said, if people are watching the same things, they have something to talk about. It's actually possible for a culture to exist. Let's see. Great Lakes Nationalist says there's ever more research that our mass consumption of refined sugars is wrecking our brains. Plaques on the neurons, then Alzheimer's. Well, I got the nicotine working against that. When I think boomer, says Half Galician, I think of Rolling Stone concert sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. Yeah, a piece I wrote, it must have been over 20 years ago. I just imagined a bunch of boomers in their wheelchairs, in their care homes, listening to Break On Through by the Other Side and shaking their fist. And I was kind of half joking, but nope. I think we're there. I think we're there already. KMG should do what a lot of streamers do and have it overlaid with the amount of money donated to him so far this month. Adam says it's not like Leave It to Beaver or Gunsmoke was high culture. I don't know. Let's see. As far as Gunsmoke goes, there was that German philosopher who thought very highly of it. That and Perry Mason. He thought that they exemplified America. Leave It to Beaver. It was ideal. It was an ideal version of an American family in the 50s and 60s. It's an interesting show. I mean, it has this terrible reputation as being sappy or whatever. It actually wasn't, It's a very interesting show. It was created by two men, one of them a Catholic, one of them Jewish, and they decided they weren't going to go for a lot of yucks. It's observational. And you know how exceedingly annoying children are in sitcoms and have been for the longest time? Well, the children on Leave It to Beaver act like real children. And that was, something of an achievement back then. Anyway, I mean, it would be an achievement now, because Hollywood now sees children as miniature adults, and of course, it's oh so hilarious for them to be transgressive. Let's have children under the age of 10 making sexual jokes, because that is just so amusing. Mexican Coca-Cola has real sugar. Yes, I have heard that. I guess Coca-Cola is my soft drink, and I found out they had replaced the sugar with high fructose corn syrup. But, that was nothing as compared to when they decided to get rid of Classic Coke. I never thought that they would do it. And then when I tasted the replacement, I thought, if I wanted Pepsi, I would buy Pepsi. SP 500 futures are down hard. I guess I didn't go into that, but the Dow Jones got absolutely hammered. Again today, market's hammered. And the VIX, the Scaredy Cat Index, is up 14%. But as other people have pointed out, what is this? Take us back to where the Dow was last summer? It really, a great many people really seem to have the belief that the Dow was just going to go up like this forever. I don't know why they thought that, but I guess if a bull market lasts long enough, people come to the conclusion that it will be permanent. I'm going to wrap up this show. I would like to thank you all for watching and or listening. If you like the show or any part of it, I would encourage you to click on like and to subscribe to my channel. If you would like to donate to the show, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. As I say, I have another disruption coming up in my life. I'll let you know more about that when I know more about it. But thank you all very much for taking part in today's show. I will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern, and I wish you all a very good evening. Good night.